We looked at the four gatekeeping professions and their failure in terms of their fiduciary responsibilities and their corporate governance responsibilities. We also took a look at the SEC and the PCAOB. But arguably, I think the greatest corporate governance failure relates to what I call the Sarbanes-Oxley effect. Improved corporate governance in using your new fiduciary responsibilities is viewed as an additional tool for enhancing financial statements and its accuracy. Sarbanes-Oxley was touted as model legislation for improved corporate governance and corporate self-discipline. However, the problem was that SOX greatly expanded everyone's need for vigilance for uncovering fraud because SOX actually reduced the number of businesses under the existing regulatory system. SOX created the new opportunities to go dark, is what we would probably call it. In 2004, an Emory University School of Law and Economics research report concluded that SOX was forcing a number of issuers out of the regulatory system, referred to as going dark, which added even more unregulated firms to the market. Now, we did a LEXIS search for companies filing 13E-3 seeking to go private, and we noticed in 2004, this is a couple years after Sarbanes-Oxley and the great meltdown of some of the the firms like Enron and WorldCom. It revealed that close to 40% of the companies that went private cited the cost of compliance with federal securities laws, and they completed cost estimates. Companies ranged from Cox Communications to First Commerce Bank shares. William CARNEY, co-author of the Emory report, noted that one interesting phenomenon of Sarbanes-Oxley has been to the extent to which large foreign issuers considering listing on the U.S. exchanges had decided to forego a U.S. listing. Among the issuers opting not to list on a U.S. exchange were Porsche in Germany and Daiwa Securities in Japan. In contrast, in the London exchange, which of course has a less onerous regulatory regime, and by some people's admissions, a more effective regulatory regime, obtained listings from Gucci, Rogers, Wireless, and others. And in 2005, 4 UK companies announced they were considering terminating the U.S. registrations. Another interesting phenomenon of SOX, again, the law of unintended consequences, was regarding leveraged buyouts, LBOs. According to the authors of the Emory report, the private movement, the going private movement, increased 500% in 2004. In 2001, there were 115 LBOs in the United States. In 2002, only 109. By 2004, this is 2 years after Sarbanes-Oxley, there were 521 leveraged buyouts. And a significant reason for the increase was the cost of compliance with SOX. Corporate securities experts, Larry Ribstein, he was one of my former authors, in his book, Sarbanes-Oxley Debacle, What We Learned and How to Fix It. Of course, I'm not exactly sure we had the DNA within Congress to fix it, argues that while the direct costs are substantial, the indirect costs of SOX, including diverting executive attention from the hard work of maximizing shareholder value, distorting, and we know what that myth is, distorting executive and directors' incentives and investment decisions, reducing access to capital markets by entrepreneurs, and creating opportunities for excessive litigation. So these are some of the unintended consequences of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Further, it is estimated, according to Ribstein, that there is striking evidence of the market's evaluation of SOX. One study of SOX's financial costs estimates that firms' total market value declined by $1.4 trillion around legislative events leading to the passage of SOX. The present value of the $6 billion annual implementation cost would be about $300 billion over time. But the most striking indictment of its ineffectiveness is the comment by Hank Greenberg, former head of AIG, who, as you know, was the world's largest insurer. And Hank Greenberg reported that they were spending $300 million a year fulfilling the new Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. And we talked about WorldCom as the largest U.S. bankruptcy, and we also talked about AIG. As many readers will recall, AIG currently holds the record distinction as the largest global corporate and audit failure in history. Not exactly sure Hank Greenberg's spending of a couple $100 million in our Sarbanes-Oxley compliance did any good whatsoever. It should also be noted that under SOX, public auditors were required to file and to flag any material weaknesses in a company's internal controls, presumably providing an early warning to companies, investors, and the SEC. The fact is that in a study by 2 accounting professors, auditors waved the flag just 25% of the time before a restatement in 2008, only 14% of the time in 2009, last year's studies. There were no warnings before the 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse or before Citigroup lowballed its subprime mortgage exposure in 2007. In conclusion, we looked at the gatekeeping professions and their failures, the legislative failures of Sarbanes-Oxley and Dodd-Frank, and also the failures of the regulators. When you put on your fiduciary hat and your stewardship hats, working in risk management, corporate compliance, or as outside attorney advisors or in-house counsel, it's really critical to understand that behind all of this is not the legislation, the regulation, or the responsibilities of the gatekeeping professions. The real responsibility is to increase your ethical consideration of what are the impacts, what are the effects of the activities and the actions of the corporation in regard to its investors, its shareholders, and its stakeholders, and in that regard to the public. So this concludes our second module. Thank you.